Right. And that's not something like it's a different thought on the media production, right? Because media production, I think we tend to always think about it from a business standpoint. How do you impact your customers? How do you get out in front of them? How do you create high quality content that is relevant to the people around you? And I think that's a great question. And to your point, you can find a videographer. You should find a videographer in your area, make use of them, and budget that in. It should be part of your advertising budget to say, I'm going to spend X amount of money per month to build a online presence, because that's where people are. The other day I had my wife took out a phone book because we were looking to see if a name was in a phone book. And my daughter, who is 12, she was like, what is that?
Oh,
right.
Gosh.
Like she had no idea. And we had to explain what a phone book was, because it was an old phone book we had just kicking around. But like the old way of communicating your business and your value proposition and your information, the newspapers and the phone books just don't work anymore. You have to be digital. You have to be present on the internet, and you have to have video, because people are not going to sit there and read a 3-paragraph introduction to your business. They want to watch a 30-second video that's going to tell them who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, and there's so much to that, because you can either take out a piece of the paper, pay $1,000 a month, and you'll get there, and you will be seen by many, many old gentlemen that are sitting in cafes. Great, solid. If that's your clientele, go for it, 100%. Or you spend $1,000 and you get a few short videos done up of yourself. You post that every few weeks. You're going to get way more views. You're going to get way more meaningful engagement. People are going to recognize you in a more substantial way.
Right. Absolutely. So my transition was there. I was like, that's what we normally think of. And I think it's valid. I think it's super important. I think it's valid that if you're in business, you have to think about that way. If you're in sales, you have to think about that. If you're in marketing, you have to think about that. Which every business is in sales and marketing, by the way.
Yeah.
But in general, I don't think we've thought about media production, about catching a generation. And this, we're seeing a passing of a generation, right? And that happens, every few years. I mean, people are always passing away, but you're starting to see like a whole generation. My grandparents are all dying off. Like there's not as many of them left. They're pushing in their 90s, and that whole generation is going away, and that next generation is getting elderly. And I think that people they will regret it. I have on my cell phone voicemail that my dad left me before he passed. And I treasure that. And I'm not going to delete that because it means a lot to me. If I had the opportunity to go back in time and sit down with my dad and do a podcast and spend an hour just talking to him about what the things are important to him, and what would he tell my kids and my grandkids? Like, what are the things that transcend time that are super important? What are those things? What did you learn? What made you who you are? What are the mistakes you regret? And what are the things you would do again 100 times? Like those questions as a young man, I don't always think about asking. And then I've heard a lot, and then I don't record it. And there's so many things that I know that my dad's told me, but I love that. Yeah. If I could have that in a file that I could share with my kids and with my grandkids, like that would be amazing.
Yeah. And it even just goes down to the way that people communicate, because there have been many people who are beautiful note writers, and they will write letters for the generations to come after. Every now and then I'll come across a story, and they're always the same, where it's like a father's been diagnosed. And so he'll write out a letter for his child who's just been born, and it's one for every year until he's 18 and something like that. And they're great stories. But video is something that is so much more accessible, and it's so much more natural for people. Once they kind of get past that initial shock of I'm in front of a camera, all of a sudden they're just having a conversation, which is kind of why like podcasts are really fun, because you're not thinking about the camera. You're having a natural conversation. There just so happens to be a camera in the room. Having that camera to record it is naturalistic. it comes off like you're still having the conversation with the person, that you're still there with them. And as beautiful as the notes are, video, audio, it's just more transcendent.
Oh, for sure. For sure.